It's such a pleasure to talk to you about this film. What goes through your mind when, you get an email and a call that you're going to be, the lead in a Mary Poppins new film?
Well, I was very lucky that it wasn't a phone call, but it actually happened in person. I was performing in Hamilton at the time, and I had a 2-show day. I finished my matinee. I joined Rob and John across the hall for a plate of spaghetti and a cup of coffee, and they told me Mary Poppins returns. And I said, she does. And I said,
can she?
I said, yeah, can she? Who's playing her? And Rob looked around the restaurant to make sure no one else was looking, and he said, Emily Blunt. And I said, that's really good.
Yeah.
And so from then on, I was sort of up for the adventure.
You told me at the premiere that it kind of took a lot of sacrifices for you and your family because you had to move to London for a year and a half.
Yeah, I didn't see it as a sacrifice.
Yeah, I know. I'm joking.
It was sort of an adventure. I think when you're married, you know that no decision is made alone. And so, I sort of went home to my wife and said, Mary Poppins returns. Do we want to move to London and sort of devote nearly a year of our lives to living somewhere else? Our son was very young, so it was kind of a perfect time for us, and it was the adventure of a lifetime.
Was it the first adventure for you outside of musical theater into musical movie making?
Yeah, and frankly, that's a big part of why I said yes, is because I believe Rob Marshall is one of the great movie musical directors of all time. And so I wanted to learn, watching, how does he do it? How does he not only adapt brilliant stage musicals to the screen, which he's done so many times, but create an original musical and new songs by Mark Shaman and Scott Whitman. So this was film school for me as well, as someone who loves movie musicals, to see how it's done.
How is it done, in the sense that how different is the process from live singing, on Broadway? I mean, which is a very intense experience.
Well, what's remarkable is how much of it is exactly the same. When you're creating an original musical, I always tell people it's like doing a 12-sided Rubik's Cube, because you're creating these songs, original songs for the moment, and they affect every other moment in the film. So there were 5 opening numbers before we landed on Underneath the Lovely London Sky. There were, I think, 4 versions of Mary Poppins' first song before Can You Imagine That? Because each song affects the others, and you're creating a roller coaster experience.
It is.
And an ebb and flow. And I'm very familiar with that, having worked on Hamilton and Bring It On and In the Heights. So that was actually very reassuring of like, oh, it's the same. Each musical has its own challenges, but you're always going to be sort of starting from scratch here and rewriting this so that all of it comes full circle.
What would you say was the biggest challenge? I mean, I'm yet to interview Emily, but for her it was like the multi-artistic challenge. For you, you're used to that, dancing and singing, performing and acting.
I think for me, the difference is the adrenaline source between stage and film. On stage, you have an audience, and that's your adrenaline. I mean, they're there. They made miracles happen. They got a babysitter. They paid a lot of money for tickets. And so that's all you need to sort of...
And you have the immediate vibe.
And the immediate vibe, the immediate reaction. With this, the adrenaline source is the one-of-a-kind nature of every day. Today, we're going to dance with penguins. And we're going to have to imagine the penguins for a good long time. Next week, we're going to dance with Meryl Streep. A week after that, we're going to shut down Buckingham Palace, and we're going to ride bikes as fast as we can down the Mall. And we're not coming back to that. So being really present, because this is your one opportunity to get it right.
Yeah, and it was one of my questions. So a lot of sets and settings were real. I'm sure that there was a lot of magic movie making sets.
Yes.
But you were really outside of Buckingham Palace?
Yeah,
you
we were really
in
outside
a
Buckingham
lot of,
Palace. That's very rare. I think, I think only for James Bond and Mary Poppins does Buckingham Palace say, okay, here are the keys. And that's sort of a testament to how iconic Mary Poppins is in London. I think she's really a hometown hero. And so the city sort of opened its doors to us.
How iconic is she in America? I mean, I grew up in Beirut, and she was iconic. So
yeah,
she's worldwide.
She's a global icon, to be sure. And I think because that movie came out 1964, 54 years ago, there are generations upon generations for whom Mary Poppins means sort of the most treasured part of their childhood.
What do you remember in watching it, what it brought you in terms of emotional response?
I remember supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I remember just thinking the audacity of inventing a word and have it become a timeless song. I remember dancing along with the Penguins and Bert during Jolly Holiday. It was just in front of my television set. We just owned the movie growing up. So Mary Poppins just lived in my house, and I suspect she is that for a lot of people.
And the songs are so much like embedded in our heads.
Totally. And not just the songs. I mean, I think that's sort of what surprised me making it. You know, Rob Marshall is the biggest fan of the first movie. You won't find a bigger fan than Rob Marshall.
Sure.
So, you know, I remember getting choked up when I saw the kite and the sash that said "Votes for Women," which we remember from the first number in the first movie. And there's so much of it that's in our DNA.